Sloth and the philosophy of Schopenhauer. Sloth's worldview aligns closely with the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer, who argued that life is driven by blind will, existence is inherently suffering, relief comes from the cessation of desire. However, sloth represents a distortion of this philosophy, the absence of will, not its transcendence. Schopenhauer advocates awareness and renunciation. Sloth exhibits neither. He does not transcend desire, he simply lacks it entirely. Thus, sloth is not enlightened, he is emptied. Sloth and Camus, the absurd without rebellion. Albert Camus proposed that life is absurd, but that one must respond with rebellion, continuing to live and create meaning despite meaninglessness. Sloth represents the opposite response. No revolt. Sloth recognizes burden but does not resist. He does not embrace absurdity, he succumbs to it completely. Sloth and Heidegger being as burden. Martin Heidegger described human existence as thrownness, being placed into existence without choice. Sloth embodies this concept in its most literal form, thrown without response. Most humans respond to thrownness by creating meaning and engaging with the world. Sloth does neither. He exists in a state of unanswered being, artificial life and purpose. As a homunculus, sloth is not born, he is created. This raises fundamental questions. Does he have inherent purpose, or is purpose imposed upon him? Purpose without consent. Sloth's existence is defined entirely by external design, external commands. He does not choose his role, thus his apathy can be interpreted as a rejection of imposed purpose, even if that rejection is passive. Is sloth a failed human or a pure truth? This leads to a central philosophical question. Does sloth represent a failure of humanity or a hidden truth about it? Sloth as failure. One interpretation. Humans should strive, humans should create meaning. Sloth represents what happens when this fails. What if sloth as truth? Another interpretation. Effort is inherently burdensome. Meaning is constructed, not given. Sloth reveals the baseline state beneath all striving. In this view, sloth is not abnormal, he is unmasked existence, the symbolism of his death. Sloth's death is not dramatic, it lacks revelation, transformation, redemption. Instead, it is quiet, the end of burden. His final words suggest relief from effort, but also recognition that even death requires effort. This creates a final paradox. There is no effortless state, not even in non-existence. Sloth within the system, a necessary component. Despite his passivity, sloth is essential to the narrative's structure. He builds the foundation, he represents entropy, he balances the other homunculi. Without sloth, the system would lack inertia, the narrative would lack contrast. He is the stillness that defines motion, the weight beneath everything. Sloth is not simply a character, he is. The weight beneath action, the silence beneath desire, the stillness beneath motion. Through him, Fullmetal Alchemist explores a truth often ignored, that beneath ambition, conflict, and meaning, there exists a quieter force pulling everything towards stillness. Not destruction, not chaos, but cessation. The weight of a single sentence. Few lines in Fullmetal Alchemist carry the same philosophical density as the final words of Sloth. Living, what a pain, but dying is also a pain. This statement is deceptively simple. It does not rely on complex language, emotional intensity, narrative exposition, and yet it encapsulates an entire worldview, one that challenges not only the meaning of life, but the possibility of escape from existence itself. Living, what a pain. At face value, this appears to be a complaint. However, within Sloth's framework, it is more accurately understood as a baseline observation. Living as continuous effort. To live is to move, think, perceive, maintain biological function. Each of these requires energy. Sloth's awareness reduces life to its most fundamental property. Existence demands constant expenditure. Unlike other characters who attach meaning to effort, Sloth strips it down to its raw form. Effort without purpose, motion without meaning, and the elimination of narrative justification. Humans typically justify effort through goals, relationships, ideals. Sloth engages with none of these. Thus, what remains is effort without narrative framing is pure burden. But dying is also a pain. This is where Sloth's philosophy becomes truly radical. If living is painful, one might assume death is relief. Sloth denies this. Death is process, not state. Sloth's statement implies that dying is not instantaneous, effortless, clean. Instead, it is a transition, a process, an exertion. Thus, death is not an escape from effort, it is another form of it, the collapse of binary thinking. Most philosophical systems operate on a binary, life versus death, being versus non-being. Sloth collapses this distinction. Both states are unified under a single principle. They require effort. The core paradox: no exit from effort. Sloth's worldview can be summarized as follows. Living requires effort. Dying requires effort. Therefore, there is no effortless state. This creates a closed system, the inescapable loop. In this system, one cannot remain static, life continues. One cannot exit easily, death requires effort. Thus, existence becomes an inescapable loop of burden. This aligns with existential philosophies that emphasize the inevitability of engagement with existence. Sloth and entropy, a physical interpretation. Sloth through the lens of entropy. What is entropy? Entropy is often described as the tendency toward disorder, the dissipation of energy, the movement toward equilibrium. In physical systems, maintaining order requires energy input. Sloth as human entropy. Sloth represents this principle at the psychological level. Action is energy expenditure, inaction is drift towards stillness. However, even stillness is not free. To maintain any state, living or dying, requires energy. Thus, sloth embodies the awareness that all states are energetically costly. Resistance versus drift. Most characters in Fullmetal Alchemist resist entropy. They act, they struggle, they impose order. Sloth does the opposite. Alignment with entropy. He does not resist, he drifts. But even drifting requires time, continuation, existence. Thus, even his alignment with entropy does not free him. Sloth and modern productivity culture. Beyond philosophy and physics, Sloth's perspective serves as a critique of modern societal structures. The culture of constant output. Modern systems often demand continuous productivity, constant improvement, persistent engagement. Within such systems, rest is often viewed as weakness and framed as inefficiency. Sloth is counterpoint. Sloth rejects this entirely, not through rebellion but through incapacity. He exposes a hidden truth. Productivity is built on the assumption that effort is meaningful. Sloth removes that assumption. What remains is effort without justification and work without meaning. The philosophy of burnout. Sloth can also be interpreted as the endpoint of burnout. Burnout progresses through stages: engagement, stress, exhaustion, detachment. Sloth exists in stage 4 permanently. Total detachment. He is disconnected from purpose, disengaged from outcomes, unresponsive to motivation. This makes him the final stage of exhausted consciousness. Sloth versus hope, the missing variable. What separates sloth from human perseverance is not strength but hope. Hope provides future orientation, meaning projection, justification for effort. Sloth lacks hope entirely. Effort without future, without hope. Effort becomes circular, action loses direction, time loses structure. Thus, sloth experiences existence as endless present without purpose. Is sloth the most honest character? This raises a provocative question. Is sloth more honest than other characters? The illusion of meaning. Other characters create meaning, fight for ideals, justify their suffering. Sloth does none of this. He strips existence down to energy, effort, continuation, honesty versus functionality. However, this honesty comes at a cost. Inability to act, inability to change, inability to live meaningfully. Thus, sloth may be philosophically honest but existentially non-functional. The silence of sloth. Unlike other characters, sloth does not argue, persuade, reflect deeply. His philosophy is not spoken, it is embodied. Minimal expression, maximum meaning. His few words carry weight precisely because they are not elaborated, they are not justified, they are not debated, they simply exist. The burden beneath all things. By the end of his existence, Sloth reveals a framework that can be summarized as existence to effort, effort to burden. No state is free from burden. This is not a hopeful philosophy. It is not even a tragic one. It is neutral, and that neutrality is what makes it so unsettling. Conclusion: Sloth does not rage against existence. He does not seek to destroy it. He does not attempt to transcend it. He simply endures it, complains about it, and ultimately leaves it. Through this, Fullmetal Alchemist presents one of its most subtle and profound ideas, that beneath all struggle, ambition, and meaning, there exists a quieter truth, that being itself may be the heaviest burden of all. Sloth as the end state of being, the homunculi as a system of fragmented humanity. In Fullmetal Alchemist, the homunculi are often interpreted as isolated sins, but a deeper reading reveals something more profound. They are not separate flaws. They are components of a complete human psyche, artificially divided by Father, the spectrum of human drives. Each homunculus represents an essential force. Greed is acquisition, wrath is aggression, envy is comparison, lust is desire, pride is identity, gluttony is consumption, sloth is inertia. Together they form a system, sloth as the ground state. Within this system, sloth is unique. He does not push outward like the others. He pulls inward. Thus, If the other homunculi represent motion, Sloth represents what happens when motion ceases. He is not just one part of the system, he is its baseline condition. Sloth as the end state of exhaustion. If we imagine human existence as a trajectory, it often follows a pattern. Desire we want, action we pursue, struggle we encounter resistance, fatigue we tire, and detachment we disengage. Sloth exists at stage 5 permanently, beyond burnout. Unlike temporary exhaustion, sloth represents irreversible disengagement, total depletion of motivation, absence of recovery. He is not tired in the ordinary sense. He is what remains when tiredness becomes identity, the failure of meaning. Throughout Fullmetal Alchemist, human characters persist because they construct meaning, bonds, goals, ideals. These function as counterweights to effort. Sloth lacks all of them. Meaning as energy multiplier. Meaning allows humans to justify suffering, transform effort into purpose, continue despite hardship. Without meaning, effort becomes raw, time becomes heavy, action becomes optional. Sloth demonstrates what happens when meaning collapses completely. To fully grasp sloth's significance, we must return to the central human figures, Edward Elric and Alphonse Elric. These characters endure pain, loss, failure, and yet they continue, the choice to continue. What separates them from sloth is not strength, intelligence, circumstance, it is choice. They choose to act, to care, to believe. Sloth does not choose at all. Is sloth a warning? One interpretation of sloth is that he serves as a warning, the danger of apathy. If one loses purpose and abandons meaning, stops engaging, and then one risks becoming functionally alive but existentially absent. Sloth represents this endpoint. Is sloth a truth? Another interpretation is more unsettling. The baseline beneath illusion. Perhaps meaning is constructed, motivation is temporary, engagement is fragile, and beneath all of it lies a default state of inertia. If so, sloth is not an anomaly. He is what remains when all illusions are stripped away. The dual interpretation. The most compelling reading is that sloth is both a warning of what one can become, a truth about what lies beneath. This duality makes him uniquely powerful. He is not easily dismissed. Sloth and the question of freedom. Freedom is often defined as the ability to choose, the ability to act. Sloth lacks both. Freedom without desire. Even if sloth were physically free, he would not change his situation, pursue new goals, redefine his existence. Thus, freedom without desire is meaningless. Sloth reveals that agency requires motivation. Without motivation, freedom collapses. We return once more to his defining statement. Living, what a pain, but dying is also a pain. This line is not just a conclusion. It is a closed philosophical system. No escape. Life requires effort. Death requires effort. Therefore, existence is inescapable. No resolution. Unlike other philosophical frameworks, there is no redemption, no transcendence, no solution, only recognition of sloth as the quiet center of the narrative. Despite his minimal dialogue and passive nature, Sloth occupies a crucial role in Fullmetal Alchemist. He builds the foundation literally. He embodies inertia philosophically. He contrasts will narratively. He is the still point around which everything else moves. Final reflection. The weight of being. Sloth forces us to confront a question rarely asked. If all meaning were removed, would we still choose to exist? Most characters answer, yes, through struggle. Sloth answers, existence continues, but without affirmation. Conclusion, the most silent truth. Sloth does not preach. He does not argue. He does not attempt to convince. He simply exists, and in doing so reveals something profound. That existence does not require justification, but enduring it often does. And without that justification, what remains is not dramatic despair, but something quieter, something heavier, something far more difficult to confront. The simple, persistent weight of being. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe.